About that. I'm going to leave this window small here so you can see the slides over there to the side, but it helps me navigate just a little bit better to have it not full size on my window. So let's get to it. So the way to gentle classical preschool years, I want to give you just a little bit of information about myself. I know it always helps me to care more about the person that is speaking, or to feel like they actually know what my experiences are, or anything if I know a little bit more about them. So just the quick 20-second thing is that I graduated high school in the year 2000, not 2020, the year 2000. My husband and I both graduated from high school. We went to our university. We got married while we were in college, and had our first child 2 years after that. And up until that point, I had never wanted to be a mom at all. I was going to be a businesswoman of some kind, and having homeschooling especially was the farthest thing. Like if you had told me back in 2000 or 2002 that I was going to be homeschooling my 4 children, I would have laughed in your face, probably kind of meanly, because I did not know Jesus at that time. But it was definitely, that's not who I thought I would ever be. But the Lord has a way of working in our lives, even when we aren't ready for him to do that. And so he changed my heart about motherhood. He changed my heart about education. So he started planting seeds about homeschooling from the time I found a book about Charlotte Mason in a thrift store, and I started reading it sitting in my nursery with my oldest child still in the womb. And so then 2 years after her, we had a surprise. We had our second daughter, and there's a nice big gap there for our kids. That was on purpose. We thought we were done, but then again, God. So then in the fall of 2011, I quit my job that I was at. It was very, very stressful. And I finally was just like, had to choose between like my sanity or the job. And so I just quit the job, came home, and was like, I'm going to homeschool Callie for preschool, and Isabella can stay in school. And then I'm going to start some type of business. And I'm not, I was done with that industry that I was in at the time. And then after just a couple of months, my older daughter, she was in second grade at the time, decided that she was not happy at the new school that she had started. And I could tell that she was not thriving, and she wanted to be homeschooled too. So we just kind of had a little experiment over Christmas break, and we never turned back from there. And so then fast forward a few years, we welcomed our first baby boy in 2015. And then surprise, when he was 6 months old, we found out we were expecting his little brother, who is the bookend of our family. And so at this point in life, I had 2 girls that were like teen tween type age, and then 2 baby toddler. And so I guess I really lost my mind, or was, from sleep deprivation, but I started writing basically an outline of what I wanted for my boys. At this point, I'd homeschooled my girls for about 5 or 6 years. And I knew I'd homeschooled through preschool and kindergarten with one of them. And I just knew what my priorities were. And so we're going to talk about that next. But you can see my family here. There's my husband, Danny. We've been together since we were 11 years old. And then the shorter of the 2 girls is actually my oldest, Isabella, and this is Callie, and this is Colton, and this is Daxton. And so this year, as of a recording of this video, Isabella has just graduated high school. She's starting college in just a few weeks. And Colton will be starting kindergarten this fall. So we're at both ends of that spectrum right now. So it's very, very interesting multi-seasonal thing that we're in, but I wouldn't have it any other way. So what did I want for my boys for the preschool years? Well, I wanted to give order to what felt like mass chaos in our home 99% of the time, because if you have more than one child, you probably feel like your house is chaos, especially when you have little ones, and then you've got emotional teenage girls. It's just a lot going on at one time. So I didn't want to lose perspective. I knew as I was, in those baby years, I also had these beautiful girls that were becoming teenagers and young women. And I knew how easy it was to get lost in the busyness and the messiness, the sleep deprivation and all the sicknesses and all those kinds of things, and lose perspective about what the real goals of education and parenting were. And so I knew if I created something to follow, I could stay more consistent about what I wanted to put in front of my boys and have them do and have them experience and all those types of things. And I just wanted to anchor my heart to the current season I was in, not just looking ahead to when it's going to get a little easier, when I'm not going to be so tired, when I'm going to get to sleep through the night, all that kind of stuff. I just wanted to like keep my heart, my mind focused on the present. And so I felt like, because I like to follow a program, I wanted something to do that. So that was what I was trying to create. It was what I was looking for initially, but I couldn't find it. So that's why I made it. And then I wanted to write biblical truth on their little hearts. And I became a follower of Christ when I was about 25, 26 years old. It wasn't an overnight thing for me. So it's more of a process. And then my husband followed suit a few years after that. So during the earliest years with our girls, we were not believers. And we felt like we were always playing catch up with them throughout, because we were learning about basic tenets of our faith as we were also raising them. And so I especially had no confidence in what I was teaching them when it came to God. And they would have these wonderful questions. And so I got to learn along with them, which was a really beautiful thing. And I know that God worked all of that together for our good, but I wanted to start as early as possible and writing the truth of who God is and how he loves them and what he did for them on their hearts from the get-go. And then I wanted to give them answers for the questions they're going to encounter about God. They're going to have the questions themselves. They're going to receive questions from friends, from classmates and co-op and those types of things. And so I just wanted them to just have these answers as early as possible. I want to make sure I was engaging their hearts and their minds and their bodies with movement and sensory enriching experiences. Learning disabilities are pretty much genetic in our family. So it's always very important for us, I learned early on, to just be as movement based and whole body oriented as possible, because everyone in our family learns very differently and doesn't naturally come to some of the more, reading and math kind of stuff isn't as natural for my kids. I wanted to make sure that everything we learned honored them as whole image bearers of God. They are born whole persons. And I didn't want to walk into this with the mentality that they were these empty vessels for me to just pour stuff into. I wanted to be feeding their spirits as whole image bearers of God. And of course, we wanted to build good habits and good manners and develop virtue and have fun and build really wonderful memories, because these early years go by so quickly. And I think because you're so exhausted, like physically, and typically not sleeping through the night, and maybe self-care is not a top priority, those types of things, it can just be so exhausting that you look back on it, you're like, where did the time go? It's gone so quickly. And now with a high school graduate, I don't know that it slows down. The teen years are just, I think there's this sweet spot at some point. If all of your children can be in like this 7, 8, 9, 10 area all at one time, which probably doesn't happen most of the time, but the early years and the later years, they go by so quickly if we're not intentional. So that's what I wanted for preschool. And so as I've, been working with I'll say as I've been online and in homeschool spaces and homeschool groups, Facebook, and just connecting with even local families, I just find that there are 3 kind of camps or mentalities that people have toward preschool. And this is an over generalization, of course, to be able to like break this down. So nobody's going to fit in just one thing. But there's one we probably all want to fit into a little bit more. And so we're just going to talk through what these 3 camps can look like. The first one, I just dubbed it legalistic waiting. And it's at the camp of no formal studies until age 6, but I have prayerfully decided that for this particular child, we're not going to do anything until age 6. It's more of those like low key attacks, on Facebook. Like if someone's like in a Charlotte Mason group and they're like, hey, do you guys have a preschool curriculum you like? And then they get like, you shouldn't do anything until they're 6. They should wait. You're going to ruin their development, blah, blah, blah. They're not ready. And it's just like there's no grace in that at all. And I think the mentality behind that a lot of times is either just parroting what they've heard other people say, or they're assuming that preschool means they've got to sit down at a desk, do workbook, they're learning to read, and that it's all drudgery, which is all developmentally inappropriate for a child. So that would make sense. But they just think of education as learning to read and do math, and they say that those things should wait till 6. So all preschools should wait till 6. And there's just generally like this like harshness behind people that are in that camp a little bit. And so none of us want to be in that camp, even if we do feel like it's the right thing to wait until 6. We don't want to be in that like harsh kind of mindset. And then the start early camp is almost the exact opposite, where you can never be far enough ahead. The earlier you start, the better off your child will be. You don't want them to fall behind. You want them to be at least on grade level compared to public school kids, if not more advanced. And in this group, I would say, and I think all of us can like vacillate between these groups, by the way, but we often would endure a lot of self-questioning. There's a lot of doubt. There's a lot of fear that just drives because you don't want to fail. You don't want your child to suffer because you've chosen to home educate them during this season. So they look to public school as a benchmark for academic progress. And then the last one is just kind of like starting off with grace, or it could be the general classical approach, because this is our goal. It's just a spirit of moderation, awareness that the most important learning in the preschool years has nothing to do with a workbook or even math and reading at that point. And this mom sees their child as a whole person, and they have a responsibility to order their days and disciple them and give them the best and help them develop positive habits, because the earlier we develop good habits, the fewer bad habits that we have, to order their affections and a lot of these things that we're going to be talking about. So this is just a space of graciousness where you're like, for me, my child was ready to learn to read at 4, or my child's not ready to learn to read until 7. And it's just acknowledging that we as individuals have the right to make these decisions for ourselves and for each of our children, because they are each individually different people, and that other people are, intelligent, and they can make those same decisions for their own children as well. So it's just a space of grace. And that's where all of our hearts need to be rooted when we're thinking about preschool at home, because it should not be a thing that there's a lot of like conflict or division over, but there can be. So if you've ever felt that tension before, just know like there is a space for you. There are other people that feel the way that you do, and you're just in camp number 3. So what is it that we should be focusing on in the early years of home education with a preschool, or if we want to hang out in that grace camp, if we want things to be gentle and image bearing, honoring, and all of these things. So I'm going to share a few quotes from Charlotte Mason that I love, and these are not preschool specific. Miss Mason talks a lot about preschool and waiting until a child is 6 to start formal lessons. But as I read through these, you're going to note that these are academic in that she's talking about school age children, but they're also just like basic parenting type things. And they're very true whether your child is 2 or 12. And so we can take these into consideration as we plan for our preschoolers, just like we would our first grader or our second grader. And I'll side note that I've read Miss Mason broadly and deeply, though probably not nearly to the extent of many people. So I do not pretend to be an expert on her or her philosophy or anything along those lines. But I will say I very much understand her. I feel like her character. And so when she says children, not to start formal education before the age of 6, she would just meant maybe learning to read and sitting down and doing that kind of work. She didn't mean that you're not instructing or guiding or directing or being intentional with your child in any way whatsoever. That's not what she meant when she said to wait until age 6. So she said, what a child digs for becomes his own possession. So we can just take that means we should be allowed for free opportunities to explore in open-ended ways. That's super easy. She said that a child gets moral notions from the fairy tales he delights in, as do his elders from tale and verse. So this just tells us that we should make sure that our child is exposed to living, imaginative, generationally significant, moral imagination forming stories. I cannot talk today. Ms. Mason says the indwelling of Christ is a thought particularly fit for children because their large faith does not stumble at the mystery. Their imagination leaps readily to the marvel that the King himself should inhabit a little child's heart. And so this is her basically saying there should be frequent encounters with the loveliness of God in his creation. She says, never be within doors when you can rightly be without. Get outside. And lastly, she said, the mother who takes pains to endow her children with good habits secures for herself smooth and easy days. And this means habit and virtue formation is fundamental to future character and educational endeavors. Okay, so this gives us, these are kind of our should. So I like to kind of, for my own self, I like to take a lot of big ideals and just kind of break them into actionable type of things, like nuggets that I can hold on to. Because sometimes I feel like a little bit of Miss Mason's work feels kind of like up here, like these are wonderful ideals. And I love these lovely ideas and notions, but like, what do you do is kind of the thing. Like, how do you do it? So we're going to break these kind of ideals into a little bit more modern, easier to chew on terms. And then we're going to talk about how we should go about doing all these things that we apparently should be doing in the preschool years and throughout all of our child's education. So these are our 3 focuses for the early years. If I take Miss Mason's words that I've just quoted and I just break them down into sections, I would say we need to be focusing on how to relate to God, how to relate to others, and how to relate to self. These are just the 3 most fundamental parts of being a human. We have to honor God and keep that relationship first and acknowledge him and have all these answers here. Who is God? What has he done for me? Is he real? How do I hear from him? What happened in the beginning? Does he love me? Does he love everyone? What in the world around me points to God? So these are all questions that as human beings, we struggle with from our earliest age. And, if you haven't yet heard your 3-year-old ask you really profound spiritual questions, you probably will any day now. And because they think really big things. And so these are important in the early years. And then how to relate to others, how to be a good friend. How do we treat other people? How do we expect to be treated by them? What's the right thing to do? How should I behave? How should I speak? Where do I live? Who lives with me? Who is in my family? What does it mean to be a family? So these are all very important questions that help our child develop a self-identity about themselves, their family and their community and God. And then lastly, just relating to self. How do I take care of my body? How do I keep it healthy and safe? Whose job is it to wipe my nose and brush my teeth and pick up my toys? And what are the parts of my body and how do they work? And what is my address and phone number? And so there's all these things related to self-care, manners and hygiene, safety that are so important that we want to be exposing our children to these things from an early age. And all of this comes down to just creating an identity for them and giving them anchors in their soul and in their mind and in their heart for who they are in the world. Who do they matter to? Who matters to them? Who are they? What is their purpose? All of these things come in at a very early age and kind of spring from these types of things. So these are the shoulds. These are what we really want our child to come out of the earliest parts of their education. No matter how gently and informally we approach them, we want them to come out of these early years knowing these things so that they can build and continue to grow toward whole, functional, good adults that love the Lord and are a good neighbor and a good citizen, and a good, husband or wife and all those things. So Let's talk about how for a second. So if you know anything about me at all, and if you don't, this will be some good information, is I'm like, it's the gentle classical press because I love Charlotte Mason and her philosophy, and I love classical education too. And if you forced me to pick one, I would actually probably pick classical if I had to put myself in a box, which I don't put myself in a box because I like all of education, but I love so much of what is said in books like the liberal arts tradition beautifully echo Charlotte Mason's philosophy. I don't see them as, some people very much divide them up, but I think they're very cohesive and complement each other very well. And so I'm not going to read this whole quote, but this is like the how. It sounds like the why or the what, but this is the how. And so at the end of this quote, the authors of this book say that piety, gymnastic, and music provide the formative basis for all later education. And I just want to put a note and say, if you haven't read this book, if you've not read any books about classical education, if you've read some books about classical education and didn't fall in love with it, if you've only read Charlotte Mason and you want to branch out a little bit, read this book. Like you're going to love it. Read this book. Now it's going to be one of those books that you read like maybe 4 sentences and then you need to chew on it for a week or send your best friend a message and talk through it or journal through it or whatever. It's a meaty book, but it's so encouraging and just delightful and good and Christ focused. And again, if you love Charlotte Mason, you'll love this book. And so let's talk about what piety, gymnastic, and music really even are. And why would they provide the basis for all later education? Like, how do they provide the shoulds that we talked about? Like, what does that look like? So I break this whole piety, gymnastic, and music down for the tired mom brain because, hello, we're tired. And so let's just call gymnastic movement. That just feels a little bit more comfortable because we always think about gymnastics as the sport for the most part. So that's just movement. Piety could be reworded as just order because the definition provided in the liberal arts tradition is that piety is the proper fear and love of God and man. So it's an ordering of affections. And then the last thing, music could be seeing and saying beauty. Music is not just about literal music, which would be a part of it, but rhythm and chanting and all those types of things. So let's look at each one of these for a quick second. And just talk about like how we might implement these to give you like meatier type of things to hold on, because again, we've got the should. And so now we're talking about a how, and we want the nuggets of like, what do I actually do, right? Like it's very important to understand your why. That's the most important thing you'll ever determine in home education is why are you home educating? And that's going to evolve and shift over time. But the most important thing that you always have is the why that you're doing it. And then once you have the why, you can step into a how and a should in a way that fits your unique family and your children and your goals and stuff. But we have to keep that in mind as we go into these kind of like what you actually need to do or be doing or seek to do kind of things. So movement is gymnastics. In a gentle preschool, we never seek to limit our child's natural appetite for movement, right? If they're moving all the time, but we want to harness that natural inclination to move as they learn so that whole body engagement takes place, because you can't sit a child down and wrap them up in a straight jacket and tell them things and them learn it. It's just not going to happen. There are some children who can learn kind of okay in that way, but there are some children who absolutely cannot process information auditorily or visually if they're not moving their body. And that's more children than really people think that it is, because all children need to move to learn. Some are just better at kind of learning without moving as much. And those are usually the good desk students in earlier years. And it's true that boys also typically need to move more than girls do in order to process the information. So we want to make sure that everything that we're doing in our gentle preschool years is honoring the fact that God designed their bodies to move in order to learn. Like they're very tactile, they're visual and they're auditory, but they're very kinesthetic. So that means unlimited free play. Just we're not taking them away from their ability to freely play in order to sit down and do workbooks in school. To have as much outdoor exploration as possible. And I know sometimes we hear these lofty goals from Charlotte Mason enthusiasts that are like 6 hours, and maybe you live in an apartment, or you have a child that still eats every dead thing he can find on the ground. Like, it's not always possible to be outside as much as we would ideally like to be, but we just have to take into account like what is the right thing for us right now, and then do that. And that's just gonna have to be good enough. Movement with songs, chants, recitations. We want hands-on, purposeful creations. So, our children really treasure everything that they make. And so if we give them the materials that are just paper and crayon and glue and scissors to make something, well, they're going to treasure that because they pour their little heart and soul into it. But you kind of see it as a make and toss kind of thing. And so then there's like, Mommy, I love it. And then they don't want to get rid of it. But if we focus on handicraft type things that are made of fabric and thread, and yes, your 3-year-old can sew, they need help and guidance, but they can sew, and different things that are just a little bit more rich and living, then those types of creations are more meaningful to both of you, and they hold greater value. So then that thing that they pour their heart and soul into, you can see it as a little bit more valuable too. You don't just want to toss it when they turn their back. Okay, order, piety, the proper fear and love of God and man. So through explorations and consistent review of basic virtues, we seek to tune their hearts to a proper ordering of self with others, the world, and ultimately with God. So this section about order is our children just understanding like who they are in the world and who other people are, and just that identity, like cementing that identity and anchoring their identity to their family and to God. And those are very important developmental attachment type things that have to take place in the early years. And then ordering goes a step further with ordering their affections for what is good and true and beautiful, and with observing and reflecting the natural order of the universe around them. So there is order in everything in God's creation. And so it's up to us to show our children or let them experience that and kind of direct them toward it if they're not picking up on it of their own volition. So here's some implementation ideas for ordering both their, you can order their environment, you can order their affections, you can order their understanding of the world and their community around them. There's a lot of ordering that has to take place because generally children are kind of born in the world with a sense of chaos. So it's our job to kind of bring, just like God did in creation, it is our job to kind of bring all that chaos into some structure inside of them to help them be peaceful, orderly people. So we want to do scripture and catechism recitations and chant virtue definitions and order our time and our items each day through calendar work, hands-on math activities. So, numerical like reasoning is extremely important, even if you're not worrying about like identifying numbers and those types of things. So we can still do math stuff without getting caught up in math, like trying to do addition and stuff in preschool years. We want to order our environment through family responsibilities, order our understanding of our bodies, our families, and our communities. And those can all be done through memory statements and experiences and excellent literature that reflects these ideals and these systems and this ordering to our children. And then the last thing is seeing and saying beauty. And so that could be seen as the music version of this, because music and rhythm and chants are fully integrated into anything you would ever want to do. Children learn, again, through the movement, moving their bodies, but also through song, anything that rhymes, it just sticks so much better. And so in our gentle preschool, we recite beautiful poetry and fun rhymes, and we explore God's creation. We read living books that enrapture their hearts and their minds. We take time to note and observe beauty in our environment. So it's all about, again, ordering their hearts and their minds for what is good and beautiful and true around them by seeing it and saying it. So all in all, these are our methods. Through movement, through order, and through seeing and saying beauty, we're able to help our children learn how to relate to God, how to relate to others, and how to relate to self that much more. Those are These are our shoulds. We want them to know these things, and we're going to do it through these methods. And so that still can feel a little like not quite meaty enough to like get into the day-to-day. There's still like kind of this little jump between, okay, again, that sounds great, but what do I do? And so this is a schedule, and I have 2 slides of it, and I'm not going to read the whole thing to you because we'll both fall asleep. But what I want you to know is that this is in our free preschool teacher's guide. So even if you don't want to use our preschool, because there are a lot of great preschool programs out there, and you don't specifically have to have a preschool program in order to do this. But I wrote this down when my boys were this age, and I put it in the preschool teacher's guide. So you can download that for free and read this whole schedule in depth. But the goal of this with a 1.5 and a 3-year-old was just to take the different aspect of our day that are our natural rhythms. When you have kids that age, you're going to wake up, they're going to eat, they're going to have some free time, they're going to have some snack time. One kid's going to take a nap, the other kid's going to be awake, and then they're going to take turns and blah, blah, blah. You got all these different anchors in your day, and you want to tie something that you've decided is important to teach your child to those moments. You're anchoring each of these opportunities. So I'll read just a little bit just to give you an idea as to what I mean. So wake up, breakfast in the high chairs. So we count out cereal bits or something based on our math focus of that month or of that week, if I'm awake enough. And then we would introduce or practice our current catechism. So, ask them, what is sin? And then sin is when we break the law of God. So we kind of chant that. What is sin? Sin is when we break the law of God. And I think that's actually a primer kindergarten one, but preschool has little shorter ones. But just, there are lots of good catechisms out there. You don't have to be Catholic or from a tradition that has catechism in order to use catechism, because catechism is simply a question and answer about God. So there are so many things you can ask your child about God and then help them have an answer for things related to basic theology and the character of God and who Christ was and what he did and all these different things. So if we happen to have some songs for our catechism or our scripture memory and all those types of things, we would play them while we had breakfast. Then we'd go to the bathroom, we'd brush our teeth and hands and hair and wash our faces. And so during one of those times, we'll use one of our manners and hygiene statements just to, I can brush my teeth by myself, like these simple little statements that just encourage them to be competent and faithful and capable of day-to-day tasks that they need to learn to adopt to do themselves. And so this walks through free play, what I'm doing, what they're doing. And then there's a natural lull. So then I sit down with my older toddler, and that's when we might identify a few colors, but we're also going to read and play some games. We're going to make some crafts, those types of things. And then this just continues to go through how we might approach kind of your very stereotypical day during that season of our life. And so my boys are a little bit older now. Now they're 5 and about to turn 7 in kindergarten and first grade. So we've moved past all of this, but I wrote it down while I was in it, so I would remember exactly what we were doing and what that looked like. And so, we've talked about what my ideal was, like, what did I want there to be for our preschool experience for our boys? And then, according to Charlotte Mason, what should we, and really kind of common sense, like, what are the things that we know are important to a child's development in the preschool years, instead of skipping past all these amazing aspects of development and just focusing on their letters and math and numbers and stuff. That is not necessary in the preschool years. We include it in our preschool program because we touch on it at times, and it can be helpful and it's good exposure, but there's no goal of mastery at all. The goal is that our children are learning who they are, who God is, and who their neighbor is. And they're doing so in a way that honors where they are developmentally with movement and order and seeing and saying beauty. And that gives them a foundation for everything that's going to come after that. And so by doing these things and being intentional about this, we've ordered our day. And there's now a natural and intentional rhythm to each section of our day. For everything that would naturally just happen in our lives, we have something that we're going to kind of connect to that so that we can do those things and not lose track of our time and not only being looking forward to the day being over with. And then we're also honoring their natural inclinations and readiness, because each child hits readiness for different types of things, whether it's some of the manners and hygiene or some of the information about anatomy. And each child is going to get that at a different time. And so we're just kind of like honoring who they are and working through things slowly. We're pointing them to God, helping them to relate better to themselves and to others. And we're just creating a foundation for strong bodies, attentive minds, and ordered affections. That is the goal of what I call a gentle classical preschool. And again, you don't have to use the gentle classical preschool in order to fulfill that goal. There are a lot of really good preschool programs out there that you can either take them how they are and fulfill many of these goals, or add to it, or just do your own stuff. Because if you can be intentional enough about this without having a program, then more power to you. That is amazing. So I just have this little video here. Let's see if it works. It is of, let's see if it'll, okay. So this is a video of me doing simple little recitations with my older son when he was around, I think 2.5 in this video. And so I just thought it would be fun to just show what this looks like. And this was just a couple of moments while we were already having a snack. I'm not taking away from his free time in order to do this. I was just able to be intentional about it.
Patient.
I am patient. That's right. What about I am?
Chocolate chip.
No, not chocolate chip. You can have a chocolate chip when you say it. Okay? Say, I am the Good Shepherd. John 10:11. Who made everything? Who made everything?
Chocolate chips.
Chocolate chips did not make everything. Who made everything?
Daxton.
Daxton did not make everything. Who made Daxton?
A good time.
Well, who do we say? We say God. So who made everything? Say God.
God.
Who made everything?
God.
That's right. High five. So that was just so fun. I miss those days. If you're still there in that season, oh gosh, just treasure it so much. Every season is beautiful, but having kids that age is just the most precious thing ever. So I hope you have to have right expectations, and we just remind them and we give them the answer and then have them repeat after us. And we just encourage them and be really positive and upbeat. And they learn so much stuff from such an early age. And the books that we read and choose to read alongside the statements begin to actually give them context. So I'm very much not a fan of memorization for the sake of memorization. So I view our memory statements as like a recitation that they learn to say. And it is always affirmed by books and stuff that we read. So anyway, I hope that was helpful. If you are interested in anything that we offer, like I mentioned earlier, our teachers' guides are free. So our preschool program is for ages 2 to 4. And we have it broken up in there where if you have a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, there's some different designations, because that's a huge age gap. 2 to 4 is only 2 years, but it's a huge gap developmentally. So we make sure to add a little bit more and a little bit more for 3 and 4-year-olds, a little bit more books for context, those types of things, and a few more subjects for older children as well, so that you're not questioning, well, my child's only 2 or 2.5. I want to do some of these scripture memories. I want to do some of the crafts, but I'm not sure if I should be doing all of it. So we really make that simple. We help you understand what is developmentally appropriate for your child at the age of 2 and the age of 3 and the age of 4. So you're not left questioning those things either. And that resource that includes all that information is completely free to download. So you can go to shopgentleclassical.com, or you can actually just go to gentleclassicalpreschool.com and find everything there as well. So whichever one you want to head to that you find easier. We also offer the free teacher's guides for primer, which is our kindergarten / first grade program, because they're all pretty flexible. And then we also offer a free teacher's guides for nature volume 1 and volume 2. And that is our science program. That is a nature exploration program that is a mix of nature in your backyard and nature that's maybe not in your backyard. So our first volume is inland waterways and forests. So if you live in a desert or you're by the shoreline, maybe you don't have a pond anywhere near you, or a forest with forest birds, but that's okay, because we equip you with opportunities to study your own nature in your backyard, no matter what that might be. And then actual, those animals, those biomes, systems, all those things related to the volumes topic. And then volume 2 is shorelines and oceans. So most of us don't live on the beach, but you also still can study animals that live in the ocean while also studying the animals in the trees and the flowers in your own backyard. So those teacher's guides are also free. We offer bundles for all of our products. So if you download a teacher's guide and you're like, well, I love this, but I want a little bit more of it done for me as far as preparation work, we offer bundles. For preschool, we have the teacher's guide. We offer flashcards. These are memory statement cards. So if you can see over my shoulder, this board with these little cards on it, there are headers like things like scripture, Bible, catechism, story of the week, all about me, artist study, all those different things. And we just put a little card up to kind of indicate what we're learning that week, or that 2-week period, depending upon what subject it is, to give us all a visual so that we remember, the kids remember. It gives them a visual anchor for some of the statements that we're saying, and kind of help you rearrange the program too. It also includes art and music that is appropriate for this age, and then a handicraft and activity guide, which is more than handicraft and activity guide. It is like, it gives you step-by-step instructions for a unit activity, every unit, that's related to our book of the unit, but then it offers multiple other book options if you want to read several books related to that unit in some way. It offers encouragement to you, hands-on activities for our science and our all about me, or our manners and hygiene, depending upon what you're doing that week. And there's just a lot there. Excuse me. And it also offers a grid that's a 4 or 5 day a week schedule for you to have everything broken down, so you don't have to do any planning at all. And then also our preschool morning binder. So when you do feel ready to add in a little bit of number recognition, our building letters, like big kind of like gross motor type things, and then some of the ordering type stuff where we begin to learn the months and the days and observe our weather. Those are all little sheets that you'll find in there as well. So that is it. That is the gentle classical approach to preschool and really to education in general. So I hope that this was helpful. Again, if you ever have any questions about our philosophies or what we offer, you can send us an email at erin@lifeabundantlyblog.com. You can head over to Shop Gentle Classical and see everything that we offer. And if you're just specifically interested in the preschool bundle, just go to gentleclassicalpreschool.com, and you can get the teacher's guide from there, but you can also see more information about all these different things in the bundles and download samples, because that helps as well. So I hope that was helpful. Thank you so much for joining me. And please reach out if you ever need anything. Have a blessed day.